All right. So now we have theme context provider, which is wrapping these two components right here, navbar and to-do list. So what we want to do is we want to consume that context from these two components. And we want to access the data that we pass into this provider. And remember as well that we have passed the data as value props to this provider tag. So then how do we access this context data from inside these components? Okay, so there's a couple of different ways we can do this inside a class component. And the way that we're going to learn in this video is by using the context type. So context type can be used in a class component, but not in functional components. Okay, so let's get into the navbar first of all and look at how to use it. All right, so we're now going to use the data inside the context from this component. And the way that we'll do this is by saying static, and it needs to be called context type, just like that. And we can set it equal to whatever context that we want to consume inside this component. So we want to consume the theme context that we create here. So I'll say theme context, and we have to import this context into this component. So at the top, I'm going to say import, open up some curly braces and theme context. And now we're going to import theme context from /contexts and inside the context folder. I'm going to import theme context like so. All right, so this is the theme context, not the theme context provider. Right, I mean, you get the difference. The theme context itself is here, and there is a big difference. So this is the theme context. We create this, and this is the provider, which provides the context. So in here, we're saying that the context type of this component that we want to use is the theme context right here. And then what this does is looks up the component tree, and it finds a provider for this context. So if it goes one level above this component, it's going to come to app.js. And it's going to find that theme context provider right here. Then it's going to access the data provided by this, which is the data that we put into the value property right here. So what it does is take all of this data that we pass into the value property, and it attaches it to a context property inside this component. So let's see that context property inside the navbar. Okay, so inside the render method, let's say console log, and say this to reference this component.context to reach out to this thing over here that we pass through into the value. So if we go over to the browser, right-click and inspect the page and look inside the console, and we can see the data right here. And this is what we mean when we log it out, and it's exactly the data that we pass through into that provider. So now we have access to all of this shared data inside this navbar component. And yeah, that was pretty easy, right? So all we have to do is say static context type is equal to theme context and import that up here. Then we have access to all that data on this .context. So what I'm going to do now is I'll show you just a bit of destructuring to get properties from this context. So we have these three properties, is dark theme, light theme, and dark theme. And I want to store all of those in separate constants. So I'll say const, and then curly braces. And then I want the properties is dark theme, and I also want dark theme and light theme. So we're getting all of these properties now from this dot context. All right? So this is just destructuring. And all we're doing here is getting these properties from this context object, and we're storing them in these variables. Okay, so we have access to these three variables now. So the first thing that I want to do is figure out if we're going to use the light theme or the dark theme inside this component. And we can figure that out by evaluating this is dark theme Boolean. Remember, it's true to begin with, but it could be false. So I want to figure out what this is. And if it's true, then we are going to say the theme is dark theme, and that's what we're going to use. And if it's false, we're going to use the light theme values. Okay, so I'm going to use a ternary operator to decide this. I'll say const, and we'll call this theme, and that's going to represent what theme we're going to use. So I'll set it equal to is dark theme. And this is what we will evaluate. Then I'm going to put a question mark here. If this is true, if this is dark theme constant has the value of true, then it's going to return the dark theme value over here, in which case we want to use the dark theme. Then we say colon, which means if this is false, then it's going to return the second value on the right side of the colon. And that is going to be the light theme. All right. So if this is true, then theme will be dark theme. And if this is false, then theme will be equal to light theme. All right, so now we have those different properties stored in this constant, and now we can output those inside this component. So let's style the navbar component. First of all, let's do a style property. Now I'll put a set of curly braces, and it takes an object. So the first thing I want to style is the background, and that's going to be the theme, which is right here. I will say background and set it equal to theme.background, because remember, these have the background and the text property. So we're using these properties for our CSS. So that's the background color of the nav bar. And then we also want to color the text. So let's say color, and this will be the theme.text. And I just want to make this nav bar a little bit higher. So to do that, I will say height is 120 pixels. And for the last thing, I want to remove this semantic classes instead of this classes here. And I'll say style and text align center to center the text. All right, so now we're coloring this nav bar right here, and pretty much that's all. So let's save all this and check it out in the browser. All right, so we can see that our app is colored according to the theme that we currently have. We have the dark theme applied to the nav bar now. And we have changed the color of the text and the background of nav bar. So if we're going to React DevTools over here, and we open this up to go to the content provider, we can see in here that theme is true. And that means that we're using the dark theme. But if I change this to false, it's going to use the light theme. So that's pretty cool, and that's about it. That's how we use context data with static context type. Now, we are going to dynamically change this Later on, we'll add a button later on too, so that a user can change this without going into React Tools. Okay, so let's take a break right now. And in the next lecture, we're going to do a similar thing inside the to-do list component. See you then.